The room smelled like lemon-scented sanitizer and overcooked plastic. Victor Jennings sat on the edge of the observation bench, his boots tapping against the alloy floor in an anxious rhythm. The lights above were too bright, and the walls too smooth, typical of a diplomatic station built by the Sorrav coalition. He rolled his shoulders and eyed the three aliens across from him, all of them swathed in shades of blue and silver robes. The one in the center, taller than the others and with a forehead shaped like a crescent moon, blinked slowly. His name was Pralek, and he had been introduced as the Coalition's Health and Biological Empathy Liaison, a title that sounded made up even before Victor asked what it meant. "You were saying," Pralek began, his tone flat, "that your species experiences monthly internal hemorrhaging as a reproductive function. And this is normal?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "Yes. Most women get their period once a month. It's part of the cycle. And no, it's not just bleeding. There's cramps, pain, hormonal shifts. It's rough." The alien on the left, smaller and covered in a faint shimmer of bioluminescence, scoffed. "You exaggerate. No biological function designed by evolution can be so inefficient and painful. It would not persist." Victor scratched his cheek. "Tell that to evolution. Look, I'm not here to argue biology with you. You asked why some of the female crew members were laid up in the medbay last week. I told you. Period cramps." Pralek blinked again. "And yet you refuse to allow us to administer countermeasures. Because your countermeasures involve suppressing their entire hormonal system. That's not helping. That's nuking the whole city to stop a leak." There was a pause as the aliens processed his metaphor. Then the third one, whose name Victor hadn't caught and who hadn't spoken until now, leaned forward. "We request to experience the sensation ourselves, so that we may better understand the human condition." Victor laughed once, sharp and involuntary. "You want to feel period cramps?" "Yes." After a moment, he stood up, walked to the far end of the room where his translator pad sat, and tapped in a few notes. "You're serious? All right. I'll reach out to Sylvia Purnell. She's our chief medical officer on the human side. She's got a menstrual pain simulator that she's been tinkering with. If you really want to try it, she'll set it up." Pralek inclined his head slowly. "We do not believe it is as severe as you claim. Our own species has undergone similar internal processes. Discomfort, certainly, but incapacitation? Doubtful." Victor muttered under his breath, "You're in for a ride," and left the room. The next morning, Sylvia stood beside the simulator rig in the med bay, arms crossed over her chest, her auburn hair tied back in a tight bun. She had a look on her face that Victor knew all too well. It was the same one she wore right before delivering a flu vaccine to a soldier who thought they didn't need it. "All three of them?" she asked. Victor nodded. "They insisted." Sylvia sighed. "Well, it's calibrated for human nerve responses, but I've tweaked the interface. It should simulate uterine contractions at varying intensity levels. I'm starting them at level 3. What's the max? 10. But even a level 5 is enough to make grown men curl up on the floor." Victor turned to the Sorrav delegates who stood beside the simulator couch with a mix of curiosity and faint disdain. "All right, you'll each take turns. You lie down, get the pads attached to your lower abdomen, and the simulator will stimulate the nerves to mimic period cramps. You can stop any time by saying terminate. Pralek was the first to lie down. Sylvia attached the electrodes carefully and keyed in the settings. "Level 3, she said. "Ready?" "Yes." She pressed the button. At first, Pralek didn't move. Then his eyes widened slightly. His arms tensed. Victor leaned forward. "How's that feel?" "It is odd. A pulsing pressure. Minor. Give it a minute." 30 seconds later, Pralek flinched. His left leg twitched. Sweat began to beat on his temple. He gritted his teeth. Sylvia looked at her tablet. "Still at 3. Pralek's breaths came faster. "Increase. To 4. "You sure?" "Yes." She did. The result was immediate. He jerked once, his back arching slightly off the table. His hands clenched into fists. Victor stepped closer. Still minor. Pralek didn't answer. His jaw was locked, his eyes shut tight. 5? Sylvia asked. He nodded once, sharply. She tapped the command. Pralek let out a sound that was somewhere between a grunt and a gasp. His limbs shook. He tried to sit up, failed, and collapsed back. Victor watched quietly. You can stop. No, Pralek hissed. I must understand. But less than 20 seconds later, he croaked, Terminate. Sylvia shut it off. Pralek lay there, panting, his entire body limp. I underestimated the experience. Victor gave a low whistle. That was 5. Not even close to a 10. Pralek didn't respond. The second delegate, the smaller one with the glowy skin, walked up next. I will endure the maximum setting. 10. Sylvia raised an eyebrow. That's not smart. Most men can't even handle 6. I am not most men. Nor human. Victor leaned back. Suit yourself. Sylvia set it up again, this time skipping straight to 10. The alien lasted 4 seconds. Then he screamed and flailed off the table, knocking over a tray of medical tools as he hit the floor. Victor winced. That's gonna bruise. The alien writhed, clutching its midsection. Terminate. Terminate. Sylvia shut it down. You pulled a muscle. You're lucky you didn't tear something. Victor crouched beside him. Still think we exaggerate? The alien didn't respond. Later that week, Victor sat in the mess hall, slowly chewing on a protein bar while scanning the mission reports. Sylvia slid into the seat across from him. Well, she said. They sent a formal apology. And a request to include menstrual pain accommodations in all future human integration protocols. Victor smirked. Took 2 of them collapsing and 1 pulling an abdominal ligament to get there. They also asked me to install the simulator in their biological empathy training center. Said something about cultural humility modules. Victor shook his head. Honestly, good. Maybe now they'll stop treating every human discomfort like it's a malfunction. Sylvia leaned back. You know what the funniest part is? What? They never asked what happens when the cramps come with nausea, migraines, or actual flow. Victor blinked. You didn't simulate that? Nope. Just the pain. He looked down at his protein bar, then back at her. Maybe don't mention that. Let them keep their illusions. Sylvia grinned and stood up. Fair. Victor watched her leave, then returned to his reports. Somewhere across the station, a Sorrav liaison was probably still curled up in the med bay, rethinking his entire understanding of human biology. And for once, Victor didn't feel the need to explain further. The Sorrav delegation returned to the medbay 2 days later. None of them walked quite the same. Victor leaned against a storage cabinet, arms folded, as the trio stood stiffly by the door. They weren't glowing this time. No robes either. Just service tunics, dull gray and unadorned. Practical. Humbled. Sylvia didn't look up from her workbench. She was elbow-deep in a tray of sterilized implant housings, humming something off-key. Pralek cleared his throat. We must request further clarification regarding the cyclical reproductive distress. Victor raised an eyebrow. You want another go at the simulator? No, Pralek said quickly. His voice held a new tightness. We seek to understand the downstream effects. We fail to consider the broader implications of such recurring trauma on long-term neurological cohesion and behavioral modulation. Sylvia turned then, wiping her hands on a cloth. You mean mood swings? The smallest delegate, now wearing a tensor brace around his midsection, nodded briskly. We were unaware the pain coincides with neurotransmitter fluctuations. That was not simulated. Victor walked over to the wall screen and tapped it awake. All right. Let's get into it then. Human menstrual cycles don't just cause physical discomfort. They mess with serotonin, dopamine, sometimes even cortisol levels. That's why some people get irritable, anxious, depressed, or just cry at a cereal commercial. Unstable, muttered the third alien. Sylvia's head snapped toward him. Try dealing with it every 28 days while running diagnostics on a failing oxygen scrubber. You'd weep too. Victor brought up a chart. This is a hormone curve. Estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone all rising and falling over the month. Pain is just one piece. There's fatigue, bloating, insomnia, migraines, sometimes nausea. Some folks get all of it. Some don't. But none of it's convenient. Pralek squinted at the graph. The cycle is not synchronized across individuals? Sylvia leaned against the table. Nope. Everyone's different. Some are regular as clockwork, some are unpredictable. And if you throw in conditions like endometriosis or PCOS, it gets worse. The room fell quiet. The bioluminescent one broke the silence. Your species continues operational functions during this period? Victor gave a dry laugh. Of course. Office jobs, firefighting, spacewalks. There's no pause button. You learn to push through. The third Sorrav tapped his wrist panel. This violates our assumptions about biological risk thresholds. We believed persistent impairment would necessitate social withdrawal. Sylvia walked to the supply cabinet and pulled out a small foil packet. That's why we have these. Painkillers, and heating pads, and birth control for hormone regulation. But not everyone responds the same. She tossed the packet onto the table. The alien stared at it like it might detonate. Victor tilted his head. You ever try working 12-hour shifts while feeling like your insides are being wrung out through a sieve? Pralek's eyes darted to the left. We have not encountered a comparative scenario. Exactly. Sylvia stepped forward. You wanted cultural empathy? Here's some. Menstruating crew don't always tell you when they're pushing through hell. They just get it done. You only noticed because someone passed out. That's not rare. That's just when it breaks through the surface. The smallest one whispered something in Sorravian. Victor's translator caught only fragments. Unseen endurance, biological paradox, recalibration required. Pralek straightened. We must revise our integration assessments. This is not an anomaly. It is baseline. That's the idea, Victor said. You've been treating it like a malfunction. It's not. It's a feature. Sylvia turned back to her tray. And it's not just about pain. There's stigma, too. You ever try asking for a sick day when you know your boss thinks you're faking it? The bioluminescent one blinked. You conceal this from your leaders? Victor shook his head. Not always. But we learn early that discomfort doesn't guarantee sympathy. Pralek moved toward the simulator, now powered down. We request access to the full biological context. Not only pain, but the socio-cultural implications. Sylvia sighed. You want to run a seminar now? Eventually. Victor rubbed his temples. Start by listening. You've got 3 humans on this deck who deal with this monthly. Maybe ask them what they need instead of guessing. The third Sorrav looked up. Would it be appropriate to offer heat-based comfort units proactively? Victor blinked. Yeah, that's actually not a bad start. Sylvia gave a short nod. And don't act weird about it. Just offer, don't make it a ceremony. There was a long pause where none of the Sorrav said anything. Then Pralek stepped forward, hands folded. We will observe. Silently unless instructed otherwise. We will not interfere. You'll probably mess up anyway, Victor said, grabbing a protein cube from the dispenser. But that's fine. You're learning. Sylvia tapped her comm badge. Parnell to Ensign Voss. You still have that menstrual migraine protocol we drafted last month. A voice crackled back. Yes, doctor. Send it to the Sorrav delegation. They've got homework. Acknowledged. The bioluminescent one gave a low, warbling hum. Your species adapts through discomfort. That is not logical, but it is effective. Victor popped the cube into his mouth. We don't do it because it's smart. We do it because nobody gives us a choice. Pralek looked at the simulator one last time. We will not forget what we experienced here. Good, Sylvia said. Neither does anyone else. Victor turned to her as the aliens filed out, each moving a little slower than usual. You think they'll follow through? She gave a half shrug. They're trying. That's more than most. He nodded, tossing his wrapper into the reclamator. Still weird, though. What is? That it took simulated uterine agony to make them start listening. Sylvia chuckled. Sometimes you've got to scream to be heard. Later that cycle, the Sorrav installed a support module in the shared crew lounge. It had a stocked cabinet of heating packs, electrolyte drinks, and a quiet sign that read, "Available for all who endure." They didn't announce it. They didn't explain. But the first time Ensign Voss limped in, pale and sweating, and found a padded chair with a warm compress already waiting, she sat, exhaled, and didn't ask questions. The Sorrav watched from a distance, data pads in hand, eyes unreadable. They were learning. Slowly. Awkwardly. But they were learning. By the third week, the Sorrav were still limping, but their questions had evolved from disbelief to logistical obsession. Victor Jennings was back in the shared medbay, trying to enjoy a moment of silence on the cot in the corner. His boots were off and he'd wedged a packet of coolant gel under his neck. Sylvia was organizing the inventory cabinet with the kind of intensity that usually meant she was avoiding a report. Then the door hissed open and 3 Sorrav stepped in, each carrying a slate. Pralek walked at the front, his gait cautious but steadier than before. Behind him, Nevin and Cyrex each looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, but their slates glowed with dense, scrolling data. Victor didn't move. "You're 3 days early," Sylvia said without looking up. "We've completed our preliminary assessment of your crew's hormone-regulating pharmaceuticals," Pralek said. "We require clarification on administration intervals, side effects, and dosage variance across body types." Victor peeled one eye open. "You want to know why some humans take pills every day and still end up curled in a ball with a heating pad?" "Correct." Sylvia sighed. "Because it's not a fix, it's a tool. And tools don't work the same for everyone. We've documented over 70 distinct formulations," Nevin added, "each with contradictory effects. Increased clotting risk in one, mood instability in another. The inconsistency is unacceptable." Victor pushed himself upright. "Welcome to medicine. It's not math. Biology isn't clean. You try balancing hormone levels in a system that can't even agree on how to digest dairy." Cyrex held out his slate. "We've isolated 3 treatments that suppress menstruation entirely. Why are these not universally prescribed?" Sylvia turned to face them. "Because not everyone wants that. Some people choose to have a regular cycle. Some can't tolerate suppression. And some are trying to conceive." Pralek tilted his head. "You allow individuals to choose between pain and reproduction?" Victor blinked. "You have kids, Pralek?" "No, then you're missing a big piece of the puzzle." Sylvia grabbed a stool and Saturday human reproduction isn't passive. It's built around choice, timing, and planning. That means some people put up with the symptoms because they want the chance at a pregnancy. Others don't. You can't legislate that into a neat policy." Nevin scrolled through his slate. "We also noted that some individuals experience intensified symptoms following discontinuation of hormonal treatments. Mood destabilization, increased bleeding, pain spikes. Is this considered acceptable?" "No. It's just reality," Victor said. "We don't like it either. But there's no perfect option. We manage it. We observed an individual in hydroponics who consumed large quantities of chocolate and then reported symptom relief," Cyrex said. "Is this a pharmacological strategy?" Sylvia raised an eyebrow. "Did she also glare at you when you logged that?" "Yes." "Then yes. That was strategic." Victor chuckled. "Look, sometimes comfort matters more than clinical efficacy. If she gets through the day with chocolate and a blanket, that's valid." Pralek clasped his hands. "We underestimated the degree to which personal preference influences treatment. Your species permits inefficiency in exchange for autonomy. We call that being human," Sylvia said. "Is there a centralized protocol for individuals unable to function during menstruation?" Nevin asked. "A standardized leave policy? Depends on the employer," Victor said. "Some offer menstrual leave. Some don't. Some people push through because they're afraid of being seen as weak. Others force themselves through because they can't afford to stop. There's no one-size-fits-all." Cyrex frowned. "That is statistically unsound." Sylvia pointed to the cot. "So is treating everyone like they're built from the same blueprint. Humans aren't clones. We adapt, but we're messy. That's life. Pralek paused. We would like to interview multiple crew members, anonymously, to compile a more comprehensive profile of symptom diversity and coping mechanisms. Victor stood. Only if they volunteer. No pressure. No mandatory surveys. We understand, Pralek said. Coercion yields flawed data. Sylvia gave an approving nod. You're learning. Nevin looked up from his slate. There is another concern. If menstruation can produce incapacitating symptoms, how are critical roles maintained during emergencies? Spacewalks? Combat? Technical malfunctions? Victor shrugged. Same way we handle a broken rib or a migraine. You do it anyway, or someone else steps in. That's why we train redundancies. And we trust each other to speak up when we're not fit for duty. Cyrex's brow ridges twitched. Trust is an unstable variable. Nope, Victor said. Not when it's earned. Sylvia stood. If someone says they can't perform, we believe them. That's how this works. Pralek stepped forward. We intend to submit a proposal to the Coalition for an optional menstrual leave protocol for all human-assigned stations. It will not be mandatory, but it will be standardized and stigma-free. Victor blinked. You're serious? Yes, Pralek said. Your crew has functioned under conditions we did not recognize as impairments. That is a failure of our framework, not yours. Sylvia gave a short laugh. Took you long enough? Nevin looked around the mebe. Is it also standard to provide communal comfort kits and peer support networks? Wasn't, Victor said, but maybe now it will be. Cyrex tapped his slate one final time. We will submit our findings this cycle. The report will include all observed coping strategies from pharmacological to interpersonal. Pralek inclined his head. We are. Humbled. Sylvia picked up a vial of saline and reshelved it. That's a start. Victor leaned against the wall. So what happens next? We adapt, Pralek said. Like you. That evening, a quiet notice appeared on the crew network. It outlined a new Sorrav-sponsored initiative, optional monthly rest periods for menstruating personnel, 0 documentation required. No explanation needed. Just a checkbox. It didn't make headlines. No one held a ceremony. But when Ensign Parnell received her next shift schedule, she saw a blank space on the day she usually called in sick. Just a note, scheduled rest, no questions asked. She stared at it for a long moment, then closed the file. Down in the lounge, Victor found a heating pad already plugged in, folded neatly on the armrest. Next to it sat a box of chocolate-covered almonds and a thermos labeled peppermint tea. He didn't take anything. Just sat down, watched the stars through the viewport, and listened. Behind him, the Sorrav passed by quietly, eyes forward. They didn't ask questions. They didn't offer commentary. They didn't need to.